The sound of my front door clicking open at 2:47 a.m. wasn't what terrified me, it was the confident footsteps that followed. Karen Morrison, my psychotic HOA president neighbor, thought she'd found the perfect moment to break into my house with her illegal master key collection. What she didn't know was that I'd been waiting in that shower for 3 hours, recording everything, ready to end her reign of terror once and for all. But when those bathroom lights flickered on and she saw what was really waiting for her in that steamed-up shower stall, her scream shattered more than just the silence, it shattered the ceramic mug slipped from Sarah Chen's fingers, exploding against her kitchen floor in a shower of white fragments and lukewarm coffee. Through her window, she watched Karen Morrison stride across the pristine lawn of Willowbrook Commons, her HOA clipboard clutched like a weapon, her ice blue eyes scanning each house with the calculating precision of a general surveying a battlefield. "Third violation this month," Sarah muttered, kneeling to gather the broken pieces. The citation notice crumpled in her trembling hand read, "Unapproved garden gnome placement, $150 fine." The gnome in question, a cheerful ceramic figure her late mother had given her, sat exactly where it had for 2 years. Where it had been when Karen Morrison moved in 6 months ago and declared war on anything that didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her neighbor, Mrs. Yamamoto. "Karen just measured your mailbox with a ruler. Thought you should know." Another buzz. This time, Jake from across the street, "She's taking pictures of your recycling bins again." Sarah's hands shook as she swept up the last fragments. In 6 months, Karen had issued her 17 citations. 17. Each one more ridiculous than the last. Wrong shade of white on her fence. Grass marginally too high at 3.2 inches instead of the HOA mandated 3.1 inches. A Christmas wreath hung one day past the arbitrary December 26 deadline. The fines totaled $2,400. Money Sarah didn't have. Money that had drained her savings, forced her to pick up extra tutoring sessions, made her skip meals just to keep her mortgage current. That's it. Sarah stood, her decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. Enough. She walked to a laptop and opened her browser, fingers flying across the keys. How to catch someone illegally entering your home. The search results flooded her screen. Hidden cameras. Motion sensors. Legal requirements for recording, but Sarah already knew the truth that none of her neighbors wanted to acknowledge. Karen Morrison had master keys. It had started as whispered rumors. Mrs. Chen from Oak Street mentioned finding her kitchen faucet turned off when she'd left it running. The Patels discovered their garage door closed when they'd specifically left it open for their teenage son. Jake's wife swore someone had moved her dining room chairs. Small things. Subtle things. The kind of things that made you question your own memory. Until last week, Sarah had come home from her Thursday evening yoga class to find her back door unlocked. Not just unlocked, standing slightly ajar. When she'd called the police officer, Martinez had been sympathetic but clear, no signs of forced entry, nothing missing, no evidence of a crime. "Maybe you forgot to lock it." But Sarah never forgot. 28 years old, living alone in a neighborhood where property crimes had spiked 40% in the past year, she checked that lock twice every time she left. Now, staring at her laptop screen, she scrolled past articles about home security systems and legal precedents for recording intruders. Her cursor hovered over a forum post titled, "HOA President Using Master Keys, What Are Your Rights?" The stories that unfolded in the comments made her stomach turn. Kansas City, HOA President caught entering homes to photograph, violations for citation purposes. Denver, board member using keys to inspect properties without notice or consent. Phoenix, homeowner discovered HOA president had been inside her house multiple times, leaving behind subtle corrections to things she deemed inappropriate, all legal gray areas. All nearly impossible to prove. Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Chen. This is Bradley Morrison, Karen Morrison's husband. The voice was tired, strained. I need to talk to you. I'm not discussing anything with, she has keys to your house. The words hit like a physical blow. Master keys. She has a whole collection. I found them in her desk drawer last night. Sarah's living room suddenly felt smaller, violated. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't take it anymore. What she's become. What this neighborhood has done to her. His voice cracked. She wasn't always like this. Before we moved here, before the HOA presidency, she was a different. But the power, the control, it's consumed her. Mr. Morrison, she's planning something tonight. I heard her on the phone, talking about a final inspection. About making examples. His breathing was ragged. I can't stop her anymore. I can't reason with her. But maybe you can catch her. Maybe that's the only way this ends. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, her mind racing. A final inspection. Tonight, she looked around her small house, the cozy living room where she graded papers, the kitchen where she'd tried dozens of her mother's recipes, the bedroom where she felt safe enough to sleep with just one lock on the door, all of it violated. All of it invaded. Her laptop screen had gone dark. She touched the trackpad, and the home security forum reappeared. One comment thread caught her eye: best places to hide and record when you suspect home invasion. The top response was detailed. Methodical, bathroom shower stalls offer excellent acoustics for recording devices and multiple hiding spots with good sight lines. Glass doors provide clear video while offering protection. Most intruders don't expect occupants to be hiding in secondary bathrooms. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about Officer Martinez's dismissive tone. About the $2,400 in fines. About 6 months of systematic harassment disguised as neighborhood improvement. About the keys Karen Morrison apparently had to her home. She pulled up Amazon on her phone. One-day delivery. Wireless recording devices. Motion-activated cameras. Night vision capability. Her finger hovered over the purchase button. Through her kitchen window, she could see Karen Morrison's house. Every light was on. The woman was probably in there right now, planning her final inspection, fingering those illegal keys, savoring the power they gave her. Sarah hit purchase, then she called in sick to work for tomorrow. She'd need time to set up the cameras, to plan, to prepare for whatever Karen Morrison thought she was going to accomplish tonight, but first, she had 17 violation notices to review. 17 pieces of evidence showing a pattern of harassment. 17 reasons why whatever happened tonight would be justified. She spread the citations across her coffee table like tarot cards predicting a future she was finally ready to control. Outside, the sun began to set over Willowbrook Commons. In a few hours, Sarah would find out exactly how far Karen Morrison was willing to go, and Karen Morrison would find out that the quiet school teacher next door had been pushed too far. The shower in Sarah's guest bathroom had a clear glass door and perfect acoustics. It was going to be a long night. At 11:47 p.m., Sarah crouched in her guest bathroom shower, fully clothed, her phone recording at maximum resolution. The wireless cameras she'd installed that afternoon blinked red in the darkness, one behind the toilet, another tucked into the towel rack, a third angled from the medicine cabinet. Her legs had gone numb an hour ago. The house creaked around her, every sound amplified by adrenaline and absolute silence. Through the frosted bathroom window, she could see Karen Morrison's house blazing with light. The woman was still awake, still planning. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Bradley Morrison. She just left. Black Toyota. Be careful. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain it would show up on the audio recording. She adjusted her position, wincing as circulation returned to her left foot in painful pinpricks. 2:15 a.m. Nothing. 2:32 a.m. A car door closed somewhere in the distance. 2:47 a.m. The front door lock clicked. Sarah's breath caught. She pressed herself deeper into the corner of the shower, phone steady in her trembling hands. The red recording light felt like a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. Footsteps. Confident, measured, deliberate. Not the careful steps of a burglar, these were the footsteps of someone who belonged here, someone who had every right to be walking through Sarah Chen's living room at 3 in the morning. Unbelievable, Karen Morrison's voice carried clearly through the house, sharp with disgust. Look at this mess. Sarah heard the shuffle of papers. Her violation notices still spread across the coffee table. 17 citations and she still doesn't get it. Karen's voice moved closer to the kitchen. Some people just can't be taught to respect community standards. The refrigerator door opened. Closed. Cabinet doors creaked. Diet Coke in the fridge. Past expiration date. That's a health code violation. Karen was talking to herself, but her voice carried the authority of someone making an official record. Generic cereal brands visible on counter, aesthetic violation under Section 4.2 of Community Standards. Sarah bit her lip to keep from making a sound. The woman was insane. Completely, utterly insane. Footsteps climbed the stairs. Sarah's bedroom was directly above the guest bathroom. She heard drawers opening, papers rustling, the scrape of furniture being moved. Bed not made to hotel standard. Window treatments don't match approved color palette. Karen's voice was getting excited now, energized. Oh, this is perfect. Prescription bottles visible on nightstand, medical privacy violation. She's going to love this citation. More movement. Karen was in the hallway now, right outside the guest bathroom door. Sarah's phone showed 2:51 a.m. 47 minutes of recorded breaking and entering. 47 minutes of a HOA president. Illegally surveying a private home, documenting violations that existed only in her twisted imagination. The bathroom door handle turned. Light flooded in from the hallway, a yellow rectangle that made Sarah squint after hours of darkness. She pressed herself tighter into the corner, praying the frosted glass would blur her silhouette enough to buy her a few precious seconds. Karen Morrison stepped into the bathroom, her phone's flashlight sweeping across the space. She was wearing black yoga pants and a dark hoodie, her usually perfect blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. In her left hand, she clutched a ring of keys that caught the light like silver teeth. Guest bathroom, she muttered, aiming her phone camera at the toilet. Toilet paper roll installed backwards, violation of basic hospitality standards. Toothbrush. Visible on counter instead of stored inappropriate, she stopped. In the silence, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, the whisper of her breath, the tiny electronic hum of the recording devices. Karen's flashlight beam moved slowly across the shower door. The frosted glass revealed everything and nothing. A shape. A shadow. Something that shouldn't be there at 3 a.m. in an empty house. What the hell? Karen stepped closer, her flashlight beam intensifying. Sarah could see her clearly now through the glass, the sharp angles of her face, the cold calculation in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for the shower door handle. Sarah's finger moved to her phone's emergency call button. 911 was one swipe away. Karen's hand touched the shower door handle. I know you're in there. Her voice was different now. Not the crisp authority of an HOA president, but something raw. Something that had been building for months. Did you really think you could hide from me in my own neighborhood? Her own neighborhood. The words hung in the air like a confession. I've been watching you, Sarah Chen. Watching and documenting and building a case that's going to destroy your pathetic little life. Karen's breath fogged the glass between them. You think those 17 violations were harassment? Wait until you see what I've compiled tonight. Sarah's thumb hovered over the emergency call button, but something held her back. Let her talk. Let her confess everything on camera. You people never learn, Karen continued, her voice gaining momentum. You move into a community with standards, with rules, with a vision of what suburban life should be, and you think you can just ignore it all. Your gnomes, your unapproved paint colors, your general disrespect for property values. The shower door handle turned with a metallic click. But I'm the one who maintains order. I'm the one who keeps this neighborhood from becoming another low-class disaster zone filled with people who don't understand quality. Karen pulled the door open slowly, deliberately. And tonight, I'm going to document every single violation. In this house, starting with the biggest one of all, she stopped. Sarah sat in the corner of the shower stall, fully visible now, her phone recording everything, her eyes locked on Karen Morrison's face as the woman processed what she was seeing. Hello, Karen, Sarah said calmly. Fancy meeting you here. For a moment, neither woman moved. Karen stood frozen in the bathroom doorway, her flashlight illuminating Sarah like a spotlight on a stage. Sarah remained seated in the shower corner, her phone steady, recording the exact moment when Karen Morrison realized she'd walked into a trap. You, Karen's voice cracked. You were waiting For 3 hours. Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. Long enough to record you breaking into my house. Long enough to document you rifling through my personal belongings. Long enough to hear you admit that you consider this your neighborhood, not ours. Karen's face cycled through expressions: shock, rage, calculation, and something that looked almost like fear. This is entrapment, she sputtered. You don't have the right to what? To record someone breaking into my own home. Sarah stood slowly, never lowering her phone. To document an HOA president illegally entering properties. With stolen master keys. The keys. Karen looked down at her left hand as if she'd forgotten she was holding them. 23 keys on a silver ring. Master keys to every house in Willowbrook Commons. Those aren't stolen, Karen said, but her voice lacked conviction. As HOA president, I have the right to inspect at 3 a.m. Without notice. Without warrants. Sarah stepped out of the shower, her phone camera never wavering from Karen's face. You want to talk about violations? Let's talk about breaking and entering. Let's talk about harassment. Let's talk about abuse of power. Karen's mask finally slipped completely. The composed HOA president disappeared, replaced by something uglier, something that had been festering beneath the surface for months. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this neighborhood, she hissed. The hours I've spent, the energy I've invested in maintaining standards that keep our property values stable. People like you just take and never give back. People like me. People who don't belong here. People who buy houses they can barely afford and then drag down the entire community with their cheap decorations and their ethnic food smells and their complete inability to maintain basic aesthetic standards. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah's phone captured every syllable, every expression, every moment of Karen Morrison's complete unraveling. There it is, Sarah said softly. The real reason for the violations. The real reason for the harassment. It was never about gnomes or grass height or recycling bins, was it, Karen? Karen's face contorted with rage. You think you're so smart? Sitting there with your little phone, playing victim. But no one's going to believe you. No one's going to care about your sob story when they see what you've done to property values in this neighborhood. She lunged forward, reaching for Sarah's phone. But Sarah was ready. She'd been ready for 3 hours. She sidestepped, and Karen's momentum carried her into the shower stall. As Karen stumbled, trying to regain her balance, Sarah slipped past her and out of the bathroom. 911. Yes, I need to report a breaking and entering in progress. The intruder is currently trapped in my guest bathroom and I have video evidence of the entire crime. Behind her, Karen Morrison screamed, not in fear, but in pure, frustrated rage. The sound of someone who had finally been caught, who had finally been stopped, who was watching 20 years of carefully constructed suburban authority crumble in a single night. The sound of someone who had just discovered that the quiet schoolteacher next door was much, much smarter than she'd ever imagined. Officer Martinez arrived 12 minutes later, his patrol car's red and blue lights painting Sarah's house in alternating colors that drew neighbors from their windows like moths to flame. Sarah met him at her front door, still in the clothes she'd worn for 3 hours in the shower, her phone clutched in her hands like a lifeline. You reported a breaking and entering. She's in my guest bathroom. Karen Morrison, the HOA president. I have everything recorded. Sarah's voice was steadier now, adrenaline replaced by grim satisfaction. She used illegal master keys to enter my home. Martinez's expression shifted from routine response to genuine interest. Master keys. She has a whole collection. 23 keys to houses in this neighborhood. Sarah led him through her living room, past the scattered violation notices on her coffee table. Her husband called to warn me. Said she was planning something tonight. From the bathroom came the sound of pacing, muttered curses, and what sounded like someone repeatedly trying the locked door handle. Mrs. Morrison. Martinez called out. This is Officer Martinez with the Metropolitan Police. I need you to come out of the bathroom with your hands visible. The pacing stopped. This is a setup. Karen's voice carried clearly through the door. Shrill with desperation. She's been harassing me for months. This is entrapment. Martinez looked at Sarah. You said you have recordings. Sarah nodded, pulling up her phone's video gallery. Hours of footage, crystal clear audio, multiple camera angles. Everything from the moment she entered my house to the moment you arrived. She handed him her phone and watched his expression change as he scrolled through the evidence. The illegal entry. The systematic violation of privacy. The racist comments. The master keys Karen still clutched in her hand. Jesus, Martinez whispered. How long has this been going on? 6 months. 17 violation notices totaling $2,400 in fines. All for things like, Sarah gestured to her coffee table, having a garden gnome 1 inch outside the approved placement zone. The bathroom door opened and Karen Morrison emerged with her hands raised, but her face was a mask of cold calculation, rather than defeat. She'd spent the last 12 minutes in that bathroom, and Sarah could see she'd used the time to rebuild her defenses. Officer Martinez, Karen said smoothly, thank you for responding so quickly. I want to press charges against Miss Chen for entrapment and conspiracy. Martinez's eyebrows rose. You are currently under arrest for breaking and entering. You have the right to remain silent, this is ridiculous. Karen's voice carried all the authority she'd wielded for 6 months as HOA president. I have legal authority to inspect properties for code violations. Miss Chen lured me here under false pretenses and recorded me without consent. With master keys. At 3 a.m. Without warrants or notice. Sarah stepped forward, her months of accumulated rage finally finding its voice. Tell him about the other houses, Karen. Tell him about the Patel's garage door. Tell him about Mrs. Chen's kitchen faucet. Something flickered in Karen's eyes. Fear, maybe. Or calculation. I don't know what she's talking about. Martinez looked between them, then at the ring of keys in Karen's hand. I'm going to need you to explain where you got those keys. They are my property. Master keys to other people's houses are your property. Sarah pulled out her phone again, scrolling to a specific video file. Officer Martinez, there's something else you need to see. She played the recording from 20 minutes earlier, Karen's voice clear and damning. As HOA president, I have the right to inspect, at 3 a.m., without notice, without warrants. Then came the worst part, the part that made Martinez's jaw tighten. People who don't belong here. People who buy houses they can barely afford and then drag down the entire community with their cheap decorations and their ethnic food smells. Karen went white. That was taken out of context. She edited, it's a continuous recording. Martinez's tone had gone professional cold. From multiple angles. Time-stamped. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text message. Then another. And another. Mrs. Yamamoto, police at your house. Is everything okay? Jake from across the street, what's happening? Karen's car is in your driveway. The Patels, we can see from our window. Do you need anything? Sarah looked up to see neighbors gathering on their front porches, some in bathrobes. Others fully dressed as if they'd been waiting for this moment. Mrs. Chen stood at the edge of Sarah's yard, her elderly hands gripping a manila folder. Officer Martinez. Mrs. Chen called out. I have something you need to see. She approached the group, her folder thick with papers. Violation notices. 43 of them over the past 6 months. Every house on this street except Karen Morrison's. More neighbors approached. The Patels carried their own folder. Jake held a tablet displaying photos of Karen measuring his mailbox at dawn. Mrs. Yamamoto had printed out text messages documenting Karen's harassment campaign. She's been systematically targeting every non-white family in the neighborhood, Mrs. Chen said, her voice carrying clearly in the pre-dawn air. The Browns moved out last month because they couldn't afford the fines. The Martinez family, different. Martinez, she nodded to the officer, got evicted because Karen reported them for noise violations that never happened. Karen looked around at the gathering crowd, her composed mask finally cracking. This is harassment. This is a conspiracy. You can't, we can, Jake interrupted, stepping forward with his tablet. Because we've been documenting everything. 2. Karen. Every measurement. Every photograph. Every citation that contradicted the previous citation. Sarah watched Karen's face as the neighborhood united against her for the first time. 6 months of fear, isolation, and financial pressure had given way to something Karen Morrison had never expected: solidarity. Officer Martinez was taking notes, collecting folders, examining the evidence that 6 months of systematic harassment had generated. I'm going to need you to come with me. We have multiple complaints, video evidence of breaking and entering, and what appears to be a pattern of discriminatory enforcement. This is insane. Karen's voice cracked. I am the HOA president. I was elected to maintain community standards. These people, she gestured wildly at the gathered neighbors. These people are destroying property values with their complete disregard for what? Sarah stepped closer, her phone still recording. For being different than you. For existing in a neighborhood you think belongs to you. Karen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Around them, the neighbors pressed closer, no longer afraid of the woman who had terrorized them for months. You want to know what destroys property values, Karen? Mrs. Yamamoto spoke up, her voice steady despite her age. Racist HOA presidents who drive out good families with harassment campaigns. Neighbors who make people afraid to live in their own homes. I'm not racist. The words exploded from Karen with desperate force. I just believe in standards. In order. In maintaining the kind of community that attracts quality residents. The silence that followed was deafening. Officer Martinez closed his notebook. You're under arrest for breaking and entering, harassment, abuse of power, and violation of housing discrimination laws. You have the right to remain silent. As he led Karen toward his patrol car, her husband Bradley emerged from their house across the street. Sarah expected him to rush to his wife's defense, to demand explanations, to create the kind of scene that would vindicate Karen's victimhood narrative. Instead, Bradley Morrison walked directly to Officer Martinez. Officer. I have additional evidence. His voice was steady, resolved. Security footage from our home system showing Karen leaving and returning at odd hours. Financial records showing she's been embezzling HOA dues to pay for private investigators to research residents' backgrounds. And documentation of her illegal key collection. Karen's scream from the patrol car was not one of shock or betrayal. It was pure rage, the sound of someone whose carefully constructed world of power and control had just imploded completely. You can't do this to me, she shrieked through the patrol car window. I built this neighborhood. I made it what it is. Without me, you'll all be living in chaos. Sarah looked around at her neighbors, Mrs. Chen with her dignified anger, the Patels with their quiet strength, Jake with his methodical documentation, Mrs. Yamamoto with her fierce loyalty. People who had been isolated and intimidated for months, now standing together in the pre-dawn darkness. No, Karen, Sarah said softly, knowing her phone was still recording, knowing this moment would be the final entry in the evidence file. That would end Karen Morrison's reign of terror. Without you, we'll finally be living in peace. As the patrol car pulled away, Bradley Morrison approached the group of neighbors. I'm sorry, he said simply. I should have stopped this months ago. I should have been stronger. Mrs. Chen placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You stopped it tonight. That takes courage. Sarah looked at her phone, 4:23 a.m., with hours of recorded evidence that would change everything. But more than that, she looked at the faces around her, neighbors who had been strangers 12 hours ago but were now allies in the quiet revolution that had just occurred on Willowbrook Commons. The HOA presidency was vacant. The neighborhood was free. And Karen Morrison was about to discover that breaking into a schoolteacher's house was the biggest. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in the Willowbrook County Courthouse, watching Karen Morrison's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. The woman who had once commanded absolute authority over 37 families now sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her perfectly styled blonde hair hanging limp and unwashed. Your Honor, District Attorney Rebecca Walsh addressed Judge Hammond, the evidence shows a systematic campaign of harassment targeting residents based on race and ethnicity, abuse of elected position, illegal possession of master keys, and multiple counts of breaking and entering. Sarah's phone footage played on the courtroom's large screen, crystal clear audio and video of Karen's racist rants, her illegal entry, her admission of using master keys for unauthorized inspections. The judge's expression grew grimmer with each revelation. But it was the financial evidence that truly destroyed Karen's defense. The defendant embezzled $47,000 from HOA dues over 6 months, Walsh continued, using the funds to hire private investigators to research residents' immigration status, employment history, and personal backgrounds. This information was then used to target families for selective enforcement of fabricated violations. Karen's attorney, a tired-looking public defender named Marcus Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, could barely mount a defense. Karen had refused to take any plea deals, insisting she was the victim of a neighborhood conspiracy. Mrs. Morrison, Judge Hammond said, you are charged with 23 counts of breaking and entering, 47 counts of harassment, embezzlement of public funds, violation of fair housing laws, and conspiracy to commit fraud. How do you plead? Karen stood slowly, her orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the power suits she'd worn during HOA meetings. Not guilty, Your Honor. I was protecting property values and maintaining community standards as elected by the residents of Willowbrook Commons. The judge's eyebrows rose. Mrs. Morrison, the court has reviewed over 6 hours of video evidence showing you illegally entering homes and making explicitly racist statements about your neighbors. Are you seriously maintaining your innocence? Those recordings were taken without my consent in your victim's own home. During a crime you were committing. Judge Hammond's voice cut through Karen's protest like a blade. Mrs. Morrison, this court has seen many cases of HOA overreach, but this level of criminal behavior is unprecedented. Sarah glanced around the packed courtroom. Every neighbor from Willowbrook Commons was there, along with reporters from 3 local news stations. The story had exploded across social media, HOA president caught on camera in racist breaking and entering spree, turning Karen Morrison into a national symbol of suburban authoritarianism gone wrong. Mrs. Yamamoto sat in the front row, having become the neighborhood's unofficial spokesperson. At 82, she'd never expected to testify in a criminal trial, but her quiet dignity on the witness stand had been devastating to Karen's defense. She told me my garden was too ethnic for the neighborhood aesthetic, Mrs. Yamamoto had testified. When I explained that I'd been growing vegetables for 60 years, she said maybe it was time for people like me to consider retirement communities more suited to our backgrounds. The Patels had testified about Karen entering their home while they were at work, leaving behind violation notices for Kariotis and unapproved religious decorations, a small Hindu shrine in their living room. Jake had presented time-stamped photos showing Karen measuring his grass with a ruler at 5 a.m., then issuing citations for being 0.1 inches too tall despite city ordinances allowing up to 4 inches. But the most damaging testimony had come from Bradley Morrison himself. Sarah watched him now in the gallery, his face gaunt from 3 weeks of media attention and divorce proceedings. When he'd taken the stand, his voice had been barely above a whisper. She kept files on every family. He'd testified. Background checks, employment records, property ownership history. She color-coded them, green for acceptable residents, yellow for watch list, red for priority removal. The prosecutor had entered Bradley's evidence into the record, manila folders containing detailed dossiers on every non-white family in Willowbrook Commons. Property purchase prices, mortgage information, family structures, countries of origin. Karen had been building cases for systematic removal. The defendant's own notes, Walsh had told the jury, include strategies for forcing families to sell through escalating fines, selective enforcement of arbitrary rules, and what she termed quality of life degradation tactics. Now, as Judge Hammond prepared to read his sentence, Karen Morrison finally seemed to understand the magnitude of what she'd built and lost. Mrs. Morrison, the judge said, this court has rarely seen such a calculated campaign of racial harassment disguised as community leadership. Your actions have traumatized families, divided a neighborhood, and violated the basic principles of fair housing that this nation holds sacred. Karen's hands shook as she gripped the defendant's table. For the charges of breaking and entering, I sentence you to 18 months in state prison. For embezzlement of public funds, an additional 2 years. For violation of fair housing laws, 1 year to run concurrently. Total sentence, 3.5 years in state prison, followed by 2 years probation during which you are prohibited from holding any position in homeowners associations. Karen's knees buckled. Her attorney caught her arm as she swayed. But Judge Hammond wasn't finished. Additionally, you will pay full restitution of $47,000 to the Willowbrook Commons HOA, plus $75,000 in damages to be distributed among the families you targeted for harassment. You will also surrender all master keys and provide written apologies to each family affected by your actions. Sarah felt a hand squeeze her shoulder. Mrs. Chen sat behind her, tears streaming down her face. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court is ordering a federal investigation into similar practices by HOA boards nationwide. Your case, Mrs. Morrison, will serve as a precedent for prosecuting housing discrimination disguised as community enforcement. The gavel fell with a sound like thunder. As court officers led Karen away in shackles, she turned back toward the gallery. Her eyes found Sarah's across the crowded courtroom, and for a moment, all the careful facades fell away. There was no remorse in Karen Morrison's gaze. No recognition of wrongdoing. No acknowledgement of the families she'd terrorized or the community she'd nearly destroyed. There was only pure, concentrated hatred for the quiet schoolteacher who had been smart enough to hide in a shower with a recording device. This isn't over, Karen mouthed silently before the officers forced her to turn away. But as Sarah walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sunlight, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends and allies, she knew Karen Morrison was wrong. It was over. The reign of terror was finished. The master keys had been surrendered. The illegal files had been destroyed. The embezzled money would be returned. Most importantly, 37 families could finally live in their own homes without fear. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Chen, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We'd love to interview you about your experience. This story is inspiring similar investigations nationwide. Another buzz, Sarah. This is Mark Rodriguez from the ACLU. Your case has become a landmark for fair housing enforcement. Would you be willing to speak at our conference next month? And another, Ms. Chen, I'm a documentary filmmaker interested in telling your story. Could we talk? Sarah smiled, deleting the messages without responding. She'd done what she needed to do. The recordings had served their purpose. Justice had been served. Now she just wanted to go home to a quiet house with its gnome-filled garden, make a cup of tea, and grade papers in peace. As she walked toward her car, Mrs. Yamamoto caught up with her. Sarah, dear, the new HOA board wants to know would you consider running for president? Sarah laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in months. Thanks, but I think I'll stick to teaching. Someone else can handle the neighborhood politics. Smart girl, Mrs. Yamamoto said with a wink. Though, I have to ask, how did you know she'd come that night? Sarah considered the question as they reached her car. How had she known? Maybe it was teacher's instinct, the ability to spot a bully who'd finally been pushed too far. Maybe it was the pattern recognition that came from years of watching troubled students escalate until they crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Or maybe it was simply the understanding that people like Karen Morrison couldn't resist the ultimate expression of their power, violating the most private space of those they considered beneath them. I knew, Sarah said finally, because she couldn't help herself. She'd built a system where she was judge, jury, and executioner. But she forgot that sometimes the condemned fight back. As Sarah drove away from the courthouse, she passed the entrance to Willowbrook Commons. The gate stood open, as it had for 3 weeks since Karen's arrest. The neighborhood children played in yards without fear of violation notices. Families grilled ethnic foods on their patios without shame. Garden gnomes multiplied like cheerful rebellion across perfectly imperfect lawns. Karen Morrison had wanted to build the perfect suburban community. Instead, she'd created something better. Neighbors who knew they could count on each other when the power few